Hi, everyone. So again, this is the CWWA Lunch and Learn for unique programming. We're going to start a little bit, we're going to start off with just some stuff that's coming down the pipeline for BCSTH. And then we'll have Elizabeth start and present some of her programming, and then hopefully Colleen will join us. So
I'm here.
Moving forward, just to remind everybody, next Tuesday, BCSTH is hosting our 24-hour census. So the 24-hour census is going to take place from 12 o'clock next Tuesday in the afternoon to Wednesday, November 28th, 2012, at 11 and ends 11:59 a.m. Pacific. What we're hoping to do with this 24-hour census is to just get a scan of pretty much everything that our members, so transition houses, CWWA programs, second stage homes, and safe homes, what they're doing in a 24-hour period of time, and everything that they do in a 24-hour period of time. And so with that, we're asking children who witness abuse counselors to enter their stats on how many children and youth they served within that 24-hour time period, as well as the caregivers that access their programs and any presentations or community outreach that you may be doing. You may have community events that are taking place for the 16 days of activism that can be included during that time. Just sort of any activities that you're doing. We also want to know how many needs you're unable to meet, whether it's because you have a wait list during that 24-hour period of time, whether your program is full, and including if your program is closed. So we know that a lot of CWWA programs are only part-time. You may be closed on Tuesday or Wednesday, but we really want all of your programs to just fill this out, especially because this is an election year coming up, and it's just really important that everybody know kind of the breadth and the depth of work that you're doing. And also because we know that you enter stats every month, or I think it's every month still, to the Ministry of Justice, to your funders, but we often, or we don't get access to those stats, and they're not usually published anywhere. And so this is just a really good way to see what that we can, use for future funding or advocacy work. So that's why we encourage you to do the 24-hour census or participate in it. There is a tutorial about the survey as well as the templates on our website. So the URL is here. The tutorial you can do at your own time. You just kind of click on the link and a YouTube link will come up, and we'll walk you through that survey. If you have any questions about anything, it's pretty much all there in the tutorial, but we're happy to answer any questions moving forward. So again, that's happening next Tuesday and Wednesday, and I really encourage you all to participate. We just like to see the CWWA numbers high and being able to, provide a good argument for why CWWA programs are in need of more funding and more resources. Probably one of the biggest questions or frequent questions that we get asked is, when is the next CWWA training? And so we're happy to announce that CWWA training will happen this March. It will be a 2-part CWWA training instead of a full 12-day in-person training. So what that's going to look like is that children who witness abuse counselors participating in the CWWA training in 2013 will have to complete an online component and then a 2-day in-person component. And so coming online, we've started working on the introduction to working with children and youth exposed to violence and supporting children and youth exposed to violence against women. And those online courses will be available in February and March. In the meantime, the prerequisites for those online trainings will be the Foundations in Violence Against Women online course, which is available now, and you can register on our website. It's pretty cheap. It's $40. And then if you're taking the CWWA training, then the other 2 online trainings will be free. I have listed here 2 in-person dates, March 11th and 12th, and March 25th to 26th. And those are the dates that we'll be doing the in-person training. So participants of this training will be able to choose one of 2 in-person dates. And that will be with the lovely Tracy Myers, who's done our VIP training, who's on the line right now also, and myself. So we'll be doing most of them. I think it's going to look like we'll be doing both trainings in Vancouver. We've had an overwhelming response to the location survey that was sent out 2 weeks ago. There will be travel subsidies available, especially for those of you who live up north and would like to participate in this training, and we know that it costs quite a lot to come down. And so Allison and I are still working on the formula for that, but it'll be similar to the VIP training in that it'll most likely be a percentage of your travel cost and not just like a flat $500, because we know that's not fair either. So Allison's actually working on the fine details or logistics of this right now in the other room, so we'll have more information to follow. Tracy, I don't know if you're on the line and if you want to say anything about the CWW training.
Oh, hi. Just a minute. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good, because I'm not used to the hands-free. Hi, everyone. Well, what can I say? If you haven't been able to access the in-person before, I think it's invaluable to be with each other in the room, to share our experiences and to talk about things that online just isn't possible. You can't get that from online. So, yeah, I'm so excited. I have really had the opportunity to work with the BCSTH on a number of occasions to do training, and it's one of my favorite things to do. So I'm really pleased to be asked and looking forward to it.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
So we most likely will have a registration date in the next week or so, or a registration form. So we'll send that out, and then confirmation will be given out before everyone breaks for Christmas. So we're looking at a December 21st timeline. And then that way we're looking at children who witness abuse counselors having priority of this training, but then we know that children and youth support workers in transition homes are wanting to access this training also. So, yeah, we're hoping that this will work for everybody. And, yeah, we look forward to working out the kinks on this. So.
Yeah.
So I have a question regarding that, Rhiannon. This is Valens PG. I did some training, as you know, what was it, a year back, in regards to CWWA here in the north. You came up. Mm-hmm. Being that I did that and I've done the foundations, I have to be careful about my allotted training money, and I agree with Tracy around coming down and seeing face-to-face people. Will there be more information around what the actual training will be like?
Yeah, we're going to be, Kim and I will be expecting to receive an outline of the 2 online trainings in the next week or so. So we can definitely send that out. I think that the training that happened in Prince George last year will cover most of the online training portion, so you'll probably be able to get through that pretty quickly. Both of those trainings will be less lengthy than the foundations course. And then the in-person training, I think Tracy and I discussed earlier this week that it would be more hands-on and resource building and kind of working through the more practical pieces of the program.
Nice. Very nice. Thanks.
No problem. Great. All right. So, Elizabeth.
Okay.
So, Elizabeth is, as most of you know, some of you have just logged in, but Elizabeth is from the Robson Valley Support Society, and she's going to be talking about one of her interesting programs that she's been working with the RCMP in her community on. So I will turn the phone over to you, Elizabeth.
Okay, thank you. The kind of unique program that I am doing in the Robson Valley is having a uniformed RCMP officer come into the daycare in our community and read stories. So a little bit of kind of background to why is what happened, what I was noticing in our community was when I would go to do safety planning with children, the idea of phoning 911 or even, speaking to an officer was just unheard of, right? They had no safety in that, and it was just overwhelming for them, the fallout of what would happen or things like that if they contacted the RCMP. So how it started is I do also the Safe Home program in McBride, and we had some children from the neighboring Valemount. We had to come and put the mom and her children into shelter in McBride because the kind of risk factors for her to stay in shelter in Valemount were just too high. Her husband had said he was going to show up at court and kill her, shoot her. So we moved her out of Valemount into McBride for court during the court time. And when her children were here, one of the officers came by to see me about a different situation. And the children just became so upset. And all three of them, all under 5, were crying and sobbing and just hysterical because they thought this officer was coming to take me away. And it was just a really horrific time for these children. So I started thinking that we need to build they need to realize that this guy is safe and that he's okay. And he's, yes, he does respond and keeps them safe, but this is why, right? And that you can go up to him and talk to him or her, whatever, right? In McBride and Valemount, we only have male officers, but so we started. He came when I had the children with me in our building. He just came and started, showing them his duty belt, and he let them play with the flashlight, and then he took them out to his car, and these children, even now, I saw one of them just a little while ago. I ran into her in the school, the oldest one, and she still remembers that. And so that sort of started this idea of, well, I'd like, to build this relationship between officers and children. And our building runs the only daycare in McBride, and they're in the basement. So it's kind of convenient that I just, so I don't know if we go to the next slide. I'm not really sure. I just had emailed Rhiannon all the information, and I tend to kind of be all over the place. So how this relates to children and youth is that it definitely acknowledges the feelings that they had of just huge fear, and we wanted to build that trust, and that we wanted to teach children that an officer was safe, so that when I was doing the safety planning in the counseling, I could say, when you call 911, this is who will come, right? And in McBride, we had at the time when I started this 3 officers. So, and it was easy for them to meet all 3, right? To say, if you need help, you can call and someone will come and help you. I guess you can go to the next slide. So how it works is that one day a week, every Thursday at 10 o'clock, an officer comes here, I give them a book, and we go downstairs. And now it's just they go downstairs. I don't really have to do any of the kind of legwork that I did in the beginning. And they read 1 or 2 books depending on, the length of the book and the children's attention spans and things like that. And then, for example, today the officer participated in singing a new song with the children. So the daycare was teaching the children a new song, and so the officer joined in and sang with them and that kind of a thing. So, the children sit down and they're ready for him and they see him coming. So he walks in and they, give high fives and hugs, and it's all sorts of like just this great relationship stuff. Okay, next slide. So kind of one of the emerging issues in the trend that it was addressing was mainly their fears. And then also what I was able to do is address some of the issues that some of the clients that were coming and seeing me in the Children Who Witness program attend the daycare. So the reading from the officers helped kind of reinforce different things that I was working on them with. So, if an issue that maybe they were showing, if they were hitting, then I would have the officer read the book, Hands Are Not for Hitting. And then they would say things like, we don't hit when we're mad. When we're mad, we take deep breaths. And then he would, take deep breaths. And then there's all these little daycare children taking deep breaths and then going home and saying, when we're mad, we take deep breaths, right? And then they would start to repeat that same kind of stuff that whatever the officer would say or what I would say to the children, they would repeat that in the daycare. And then, we had situations where some of the daycare children were saying, well, you need to take deep breaths when you're mad. Or so sort of they were really just creating this environment of, handling emotions in more of a healthy way because it was being reinforced by some of the books that the officers were reading, right? Okay, so you can go to the next one. The one benefit for sure is just that it was increasing the children's feeling of safety, but also like that my clients' level of safety, but also just children in general, right? Even some children that maybe haven't yet disclosed that something's going on, or it just is building that idea that you can call 911 if you're in trouble or hurt, and just building that idea that they're approachable and that it's a positive relationship. Okay, next one. So some of the challenges that I faced is, in a funny way, the officers argue about whose turn it is. So they, like just the other day, one of them came and said, I've been here, and you haven't been recording that I've been here, and that they were arguing about whose turn it was because they are all loving coming here. And I said to them, are you guys sure? Are you really liking it? Because if you're not, you need to let me know. And they said, these children, are preschool daycare aged, and they look up to these men, right? And so they kind of get this good aspect of, positiveness of having children want to high five them and want to wave at them when they're used to, kids fingering them or running away or things like that, right? So it's starting at this really young age, letting them know that the officers are friendly and approachable. And so some of the challenges, the true one is that sometimes it gets trumped by their official police business. So sometimes I'll get a phone call and they'll be saying, we can't come and read today, we're off to a file. And then what they do, though, in McBride at least, is they really try hard to come back later on in the day if they can to make it up, because the children know. I mean, we've been doing this now for over a year faithfully every week. And so they know that, an officer is coming, and they get excited as to who it is. So sometimes, they get disappointed when it doesn't happen. And then in Valemount, there's more members. There's, I think, about 5 or 6. And so sometimes they're quite a lot more busy. They have 2 different highways that they have to do a lot of traffic stuff on. So they don't, they can't necessarily make it to do like a follow-up. So one time here in McBride, the officer couldn't read in the morning, so he could come back at snack time. So he read the book while everyone was eating snack, and that's just kind of how it worked well for them. Okay, you can go to the next one. So the funding was really nothing. In the program, it was all books that I had either at home or I would borrow from the library, or ones that I already had existing in my program. So I didn't go out and spend any money on books. And in the beginning, it was really like maybe 20 minutes a week out of my day, and that was to kind of go down, sort of prepare the children and just say, a police officer is going to come today, and I wonder what they're going to read or wonder what they're going to teach us or things like that. And then in the beginning, it was kind of a little bit of follow-up where I would stay to just help answer any of the questions that maybe children had. And in the beginning, it definitely, I mean, it was certainly nothing about the book. It was, wow, you know, what's this do on your belt, and why do you have a yellow stripe? And so in the beginning, it was really more just about the officer and what they do and what they have. And so it really had no like literacy or safety component to it other than just getting to know them. And then really the only cost for me, and I kind of put it in there jokingly, was snacks for the officers. So when I approached this, we've got a really good relationship with our detachment. So I would, when I wanted to propose the idea, I brought baking and I brought cookies. And I just sat down and I said, hey guys, here's some cookies. I have an idea to share with you. And in our community, bring food, people will come. You can get really far with snacks and baking. So that's sort of how I approached it. And I mean, you certainly don't have to do that. And it was just one way that we reach our officers. So really funding-wise, there wasn't much, and because, I mean, my building is located with the daycare below, right in our building, it didn't really take anything for me to drive to the center or anything, but otherwise, you know, when I had to do it in Valemount and kind of set it up there, I just kind of went to my management and said, you know, I'm booking an hour to be able to go over to the daycare. And it was sort of, I treated it as though it was a session with a child. And yeah, so that's sort of how I dealt with kind of the funding part of it. So, okay, next slide. The main partnership is definitely first having a daycare center or something like, you know, just basically a daycare or a preschool that is willing to have you come in, and then a willing detachment commander and you know, corporals or constables or whoever who is wanting to do it. Maybe in larger centers you could have one officer that maybe if you've got a really good partnership with one, then maybe he could be the one that comes in, and it doesn't necessarily have to be once a week like we have here, but just that, you know, when the daycare is talking about safety with children, I came from a daycare background, and so we would do field trips to the police station, and we would, you know, have officers come in for like fun activities, and this kind of, you know, as long as your daycare is willing to sort of have that. And then all the parents were really on board. You know, no one, like the daycare staff kind of took it out to their parents and okayed it with families, and there wasn't any families that said, no, we don't want this. And I mean, if there had, I probably would have kind of dealt with that if it had come up, but it didn't, thankfully. And so it really just is a really simple partnership between the two. Okay, next. So some of the lessons that we've learned is mainly the impacts that it's had on children. And we've had some families in McBride that, you know, are children that either I know something is happening and they haven't accessed service yet. And one of kind of the beautiful things was there was a community event and the officer was at it. And this child that I, you know, kind of suspected and sort of knew stuff was going on with them, they ran up to the officer and like jumped in his arms, and you know, they hugged and high-fived and just kind of were talking. And then mom came over and talked to the officer and just, you know, small talk chit chat. And there wasn't really anything formal, but because it was in this like community event, it didn't raise any suspicion as to, oh, why is she talking to so-and-so? Why is she talking to an officer, right? And so then that child, you know, normally would not have ever gone up to the officer, but because he knew the officer from coming and reading, and it wasn't even like the same officer, right? It was just that uniform that he identified, okay, look, this is okay. And then the other thing was that I was seeing in my kind of practice with the children, the actual counseling, children were saying, yeah, you know, I'm going to call 911 when stuff starts happening because I know that they're going to come and help. And then I actually just in Valemount had a little guy, one of my 5-year-olds, he called 911, right? And I don't know for sure that this is the direct link, that because he got read to in the daycare, that's why he called 911. But he had been someone that before, when I was working with him, you know, the idea of calling 911 wasn't okay for him. But then he actually did it, right? So I don't know. I think it's a link, and I will tell people it's a link. But anyways, so yeah, so that's that. We can go to the next one. And kind of, I guess, my words of wisdom are definitely choosing books that are culturally diverse and age appropriate. Our daycare has, 30-month-old children up to kind of 4-year-olds. So you really have to make sure that you're choosing some books that the little ones will actually sit through. And then I did a lot of legwork in the beginning about talking with the officers and the staff on how to support the children and their mothers living with violence. I did a lot of presentations to the daycare staff and had done PowerPoints and things like that with them so that they could understand what to do if a child did disclose, or just how to support a mom, right? Because sometimes these moms are the ones that are, talking with the daycare. And then just making sure all the players are on board, and then having a backup plan in case the officer isn't able to make it, and then just being prepared for disclosures and having conversations with everyone for kind of what to do after a child discloses. And because it is daycare, they do have their protocols and things like that, but just making sure you're talking about, okay, are we going to do it together? What are we going to do? So that's sort of, that's that slide. So you can go on to the next one. Okay, so now it's discussions and questions.
Does anybody have any questions for Elizabeth?
Well, Elizabeth, I know that you had, you have a more familiar kind of relationship with some of the RCMP there. What would you suggest for a larger community like Prince George?
I think it's in Prince George. If you just went to the commander there and just, propose this idea and just see if they have some sort of, sometimes they have like a school liaison officer that their role is to be in schools and visits and stuff like that. So that would be a place to start, because that was sort of how this started happening here, was that we had a member that transferred from Golden, and that was his role. He was the school liaison officer. I don't think he was actually in Golden, but he was somewhere along in his career. That was his job. And he would go to the schools, and he would just sit there and eat lunch, right? And in the beginning, no one sat with him at his table, right? But it was then slowly after he got going there, other kids started sitting at his table, and then, then it kind of went into his like policey aspect of, forming relationships with kids and that kind of a thing. But so that's what I would suggest in a larger center. And I mean, we're fortunate. We have 4 members. Woo! so it is, it is much easier for me to go and propose it to them because we are small. But in a larger center, what I would do is go to like the commander, the staff sergeant or the corporal, and find out if there is a school liaison officer. Because now what we're wanting to do is our schools are getting interested in this because they're seeing this, positive relationship with the daycare and the officers, and they're wanting to like propose the idea of having an officer come and read to some of the primary grades or just show up at lunchtime, right, and build that trust. So that's where I would start, and bake cookies because they like cookies.
Does anyone else have a question? No?
I have another one.
Okay.
So in the past, I've had many interactions with RCMP. One in particular comes to mind because I come from an EC background as well. Mm-hmm. Have you had any problems, or have you had to give any boundaries to the RCMP officers as far as what they'll share and the way that they articulate themselves?
I did a little bit in Valemount. Okay. The officers here are, they kind of got it, but the Valemount ones I definitely had to sort of just say, we're not going to get into a big, ethical discussion about, drugs are bad or whatever, right? We're not going to get into that. This is just really kind of superficial, right? And then as we kind of go along and as the relationship develops, like we started this in McBride, and then we had it for a good year almost before Valemount got on board. And so Valemount's still kind of in the beginning where they're, kind of just reading the stories. Sometimes it turns into a little bit of show and tell more, where kids will ask, oh, what is this? What's that on your belt or whatever. So they're kind of still in that stage. But I always would phone the officer kind of before, and I would just remind them, check in, make sure that they could actually do it, that there wasn't any problems. And then I would follow up after, and I would ask, how was it? How did it go? And then, they would kind of bring up sometimes, oh, yeah, so-and-so said this. And I would say, okay, yeah, and what did you do, right? And so it was sort of just following up a little bit with them. And then it was when I was at the meeting, when I discussed it and proposed it to them, I really stated my expectations. And I said, this is what I would like from you. And I really just explained it's that relationship. I'm not expecting you to go in there and counsel any children or, go after parents guns blazing or anything like that, but just, and they recognize it too, that they said, teenagers hate us. Kids don't like us. Some do. Some definitely do, but a lot don't. We are the bad guys. We are the ones that arrest their dads, right, and put them in jail. And so they recognized that it had to just be really simple and just that, hey, kids, these little ones, kind of like us. We're at that age that some are definitely afraid of us, but they haven't kind of learned that we're bad yet, right? So that was... I haven't yet had to really say to someone, you can't do that, because they're all really understanding, and I was really clear with what I was expecting of them. Right. Yeah.
Okay.
And then the other thing, kind of back to the first question about talking to an officer, I know that our commander here in McBride, he would be totally willing to talk to any other officers, like any other commanders about it, because he really sees the value in it, right? And he, talks with the other commander in Valemount, and they kind of talk about, oh yeah, so how's your reading program going? Oh, it's going good. Okay, so is ours. And so he could talk to the officer in whatever community about the policing aspect, because it meets some sort of criteria that they need for, right, for their mayors want to know what they're doing for community policing, so this counts as community policing. So it works for them too, right? So it kind of is a win-win for everybody.
Well, thanks for that. I appreciate that.
Yeah. And I can give you his number too, and then you can call him directly. So.
Elizabeth, this is Tracy Myers in Nanaimo. I really appreciate you bringing this. I think it's fabulously creative, and I guess it's not a question, more of a comment. I just really think it's a brilliant way to do some deep educating of the RCMP about impact of trauma and bring, a different story to them that really may help when they arrive at the house some evening at someone's house on a call. So. Bravo. Yeah, it's cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, so we're going to move on. If you have questions for Elizabeth, I can give you or connect you with her. And her information is on the first slide, so when I send this out, that information will be there. Colleen, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, you can? Okay.
So our next guest is Colleen Making from the Shoe Shop Area Family Emergency Society. We don't have fancy slides for Colleen, so she's just going to talk about her amazing program that she's been working with in the shoe shop area. So I'll hand it over to you, Colleen.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, I just got asked to do this and didn't have a lot prepared. So here in Salmon Arm, I have been working with our Junior A hockey team and with some of the players, helping me co-facilitate for our grade 10 planning classes on healthy relationships. And it has spun into quite a positive role model, having young men involved in the education around violence prevention and having men speak up. And with our whole Ryan Kessler public service announcement, it kind of really ties in quite nicely for that. So part of this, just going through the program information, how does this program relate to children, youth exposed to violence? Well, one, having a player from a junior A hockey team who maybe is more privileged or hasn't experienced abuse himself, is exposed and educated, and they reach a lot of kids in a hero worship sense. So educating him and changing his point of view about the kids that come up to him after games. The particular person that worked with me for 3 years was a captain of the team, and it changed how he related to children. And part of Junior A hockey, or even a Junior B hockey club for smaller communities, is to do volunteer time. And I know that the program we ran in the hockey, the BCHL hockey news, and they do a segment on community heroes. So my player was featured in that, and each year I have at least 8 players who will come and help at our annual Christmas party and work with all the kids who have been through our programming to help support children and make it fun and create that positive role model. And it's always difficult to get men to speak up, so it's about engaging men. So Dave is the name of the player who worked with me, and we ended up being asked to teach an actual class at the high school. We did it for 8 weeks out of an actual class time. 22 disenfranchised guys came to class every week to see us. The teachers were just amazed. And he didn't use his status as a hockey player when he was doing that group with me. The challenges of this program is players get traded, so you may create a connection with a player and then they disappear and you don't have that role model, and it's like, But I have had other replacements and other kids come forward, but the burden of that is then you're always constantly training them and retraining them. But the organization's goals are to be, in Junior A hockey, are to be public service and community-mindedness. So in terms of starting a program, it's about finding out if you have a hockey club in your community, which lots of communities do have a Junior B or a Junior A hockey club, no matter how isolated they are, and the general managers will put you in touch with somebody who does their public relations, and out of a team of 20, there are always, I have always found a group of guys that are bright, intelligent, caring, empathetic, and would love the opportunity to help with kids, and are blown away when you actually break that barrier to speak to them. So it's a real benefit to have those young men and boys breaking stereotypes and about speaking up. It is the scheduling and timing are the challenges, and retaining somebody to keep them, because I know the first player, Dave, who I worked with for 3 years, he goes to Western Michigan and lives in Kalamazoo now because he's continued on, but I also know he continues on the work that I started with him. And there are lots of great PR, so it just creates just time off of my desk to continually train them. However, kids still talk to me. Clients that I see today still ask me about how Dave's doing, where he's at, and are really keen to know that he stepped up and spoke up with them and for them. And so it's just really great that way. And I think that for me is a quick nutshell, because I know this ends soon. So for me, it's more important if anybody has questions.
Does anybody have questions for Colleen about working with hockey players in their community?
What ages of kids do you have for this? And
for clients, you mean?
Pardon?
Like in terms of the clients that see them?
Yeah.
Well, our 8-week class that we did was grade 10 to grade 12 students.
Okay.
But he's worked with my 5-year-olds and up. So it wasn't never capped. It was the whole range of kids that I see.
Okay, thanks.
So, Colleen, were you going on like a program that you had already been running, or a program that you had made yourself?
Strictly what I made myself, and I've always done school presentations, like in terms of healthy relationships to the high schools and teaching communication skills with the healthy relationships. Mm-hmm. I have always just done that. But being able to engage a young person to co-facilitate with me, so then we were able to do specific gender work. Like then teachers were like, can you just take all our grade 10 boys? So then we would do, 6-week segments with just the grade 10 boys. So, and then they have a guy to talk to and ask questions to.
Right.
Who's a young, energetic, positive guy as opposed to some old lady. We would joke about that. The yin and the yang. Because, like in one group, the boys looked at me and Dave and said, "Are you two married?" Hilarious. But just the engagement and the comfort and the level of questions that come out, because having done the groups without a male co-facilitator and now having done it with a male, like the difference is night and day, especially with the engagement of the young boys.
Mm-hmm.
And then we created a program within the Junior A hockey called Backs Buddies, which I didn't really speak to, but Dave really took that on with the organization, and we got free tickets to the hockey games, and I would just drive kids to get them there because they would never be able to afford to go watch them play. And then, of course, they'd have signs for Dave, and then it was that hero worship, and then they could talk to him after the game, and they could meet other players after the game, and it just became a really positive, just community event that was highly publicized and talked about. So really great for the Junior A hockey, because that myth of these young men that are hockey players come into communities because they're billeted, they live in different people's homes, they're not necessarily from our community. Really giving them a positive too, right? So engaging them on that level about that hockey players aren't all these kind of jockey, kind of don't care, just want to party kind of guys.
So when you first sought them out, you obviously went through the organization a bit. So did you ask for specific kinds of men?
No, the coaches, like once you can, and again, Salmon Arm's a small town, so I happen to have a daughter who went to school who is the age of and friends with, so then you get to know some of them that way, that they're new to the community. But the coaches know which players are up to the task when the players come. So through a general manager, if they engage in that level, they're happy to offer certain groups of the guys to volunteer for that. And they'll put it to the guys. If you have a proposal, we want somebody to help co-facilitate, do a public presentation, who's interested, they'll put it to the team. And the leaders, a lot of these guys are really good leaders, and they're happy to step up and come and help out. But the challenge is their schedules, because it's their job to play hockey, so it's fitting it around when you're available and they're available.
Any other questions for Colleen?
Just Colleen, this really inspiring an idea to work with sort of locally known athletes, and I'm hoping you're open to maybe receiving more questions with email. Can we fire more questions at you through email or give you more questions?
Absolutely. And for me, it was just kind of how it happened and kind of continued on and to do that work. So I'm happy to spend the time to answer any questions. It's a difficult concept to kind of, it's not like a canned presentation. It's because I have used several different players, and each player brings their own unique strength to it. And so what I use from them to benefit my clients. And I've had certain clients just individually come one-on-one to play cards with a couple of young boys that I, having difficulty connecting with. So it's adapting it all the time to the needs of my program and my clients, and then the boys that are offering their time to help out.
Wow, thank you, yeah.
And just as a note, just because I've been involved with the Junior A hockey now for so many years, I get their junior hockey magazine, and they often do community heroes, and like Quesnel, Powell River, Surrey, Trail, like all of those places, they talk about the community commitment to their players. So going at an agency perspective, one could present a letter and seeing who could volunteer, and if you had a specific, even if you started with a one-time event where they came to help out, a reading program, just like the RCMP reading program that Val presented, you could have a hockey players reading to kids on violence. Like they will do that time. It's part of their obligation to community for those hockey clubs.
Good to know.
So, and I know that there are football clubs and other sports, but for me, my experience is directly related to the Junior A hockey, so that's what I know. So that's what I speak to. So, but happy to answer emails or have a phone conversation privately with somebody if somebody's interested in that.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Thank you, Colleen, for that, and thank you, Elizabeth. And thank you for bringing up the Ryan Kessler PSA. I just sent a little note in the chat box. I don't know if you've seen it, but we've had just a few negative comments about the Kessler PSA. So if you happen to be on YouTube and would like to comment back, please feel free to do so.
Really? People have put negatives?
Yeah, they just and the points are valid, right? So hockey is a violent sport. He's not a good role model as someone to speak to ending violence against women because he's violent on the ice towards other men as part of his job. And there's some other comments there. So take a look if you feel inclined to do so. Yeah, that's all I'm going to say about that because I don't want to encourage anyone to do so. So I'm just going to stop the recording here. Just bear with me.
Thank you. Please stand by.